Lifestyle edition. It's Alcohol Awareness Month, so we're really digging into the topic here on alcohol, how it affects your body, and then of course the social aspect to it as well. So a couple different topics that we're discussing here. So I'd like to introduce our first guest, nutritionist Shira Hirshberg with All Foods Nutrition, to talk about alcohol, its impact on our health and our body, and more. So I'd like to welcome Shira to the show. Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, doing well. How are you?
Good, good. So nice to have you, as always, in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Let's talk a little bit about alcohol. And, of course, everyone's always interested in, can it be good for me? What does it do to my body? And all that. So we have tons to talk about. So let's talk a little bit about alcohol and really just what it is. What are the kinds of alcohol? Let's start with the basics, right?
Sure. So usually we think in terms of kind of what's a standard drink, right? So a standard drink of beer is very different from hard liquor, and most people know that, but if you're looking at what's a standard beer is 12 ounces, standard wine is 5, right? So much different size.
Yeah. Plus, when you go get a glass of wine, you're like, I want a big pour. But
right. So very different. What you're getting served at a bar or restaurant may not be a standard drink.
Okay.
Sometimes it's quite a lot more than that. And especially when we get into the distilled alcohol kind of liquor area, 1.5 ounces is a standard drink. So often there's quite a bit more than that in a drink you might get at a bar.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's talk about how really the alcohol affects our body. Are there really any health benefits to drinking?
So there is a general health benefit, we think, to moderate drinking.
Okay.
So when I say moderate drinking, for women, it's 1 drink a day. For men, it's 2 drinks a day. We can talk a little bit more about why that is later. It's not just the body size. Most people are like, well, men tend to be bigger, and that's actually not the only reason. So we've got that moderate drinking can provide a health benefit. We know, at least we have research in middle and older age adults. I don't really know for young people, that's just, we don't have data on that. But in middle and older adults, that moderate drinking decreases your risk of cardiovascular disease and mortality, dying. But we don't have enough evidence to say that you should actually start drinking if you don't. So we're not saying, oh, you don't drink at all. Yes, definitely start drinking. It's going to help your health. That's not the situation. But, sticking to that moderate drinking, we do think there's a benefit for that for older folks. And the key really is that moderate part.
And so when we are thinking about, okay, well, if I am going to have a drink, is there any data on what type of drink may or may not be more beneficial?
There has been a lot of research on red wine. There's a compound in that they've studied extensively, but we don't really know that it's a lot better. Really, most of the evidence says that 1 alcoholic drink of any kind, or moderate drinking, like I said, 2 for men, has the same benefit. So right now, that's really what we think. It doesn't matter that much. In terms of calories, of course it does, right?
Yeah.
Because there are often other things added to other drinks.
Yeah.
So sticking with something like beer or wine, you know what you're getting, whereas a mixed drink, obviously, there's a bunch of stuff added to that, which has a lot more calories. So if we're looking in terms of weight management, that's another component.
Yeah, so maybe having the glass of red wine versus the pina colada or the margarita.
Better choice for health, right? Exactly. Yes, the alcohol part might be the same. Probably not, but let's say the alcohol part is the same. That has the same hypothetical health benefit. But if you take into account the other stuff in there, the sugar, the added fat, depending on the drink, that's going to have some negative health consequences. So you might outweigh your benefits. So sticking with something simple like wine certainly is a good thing for that reason.
So let's stick kind of with that focus in mind. If we are looking at which type of drink, if we're going out or maybe we're having a nice dinner, when we're looking at the health benefit in terms of whether it's heart health or maybe weight management, when we're looking at what type of beverage we'd like to consume, are there certain things that we should look for if we're trying to keep a lower weight or maybe we're trying to maintain low blood sugar?
Right. So the kind of easiest things to manage are wine and light beer in terms of calories, right? Those are 100-ish, right? Somewhere between 100 and 120. And then once we start getting into heavier beers, it goes up. Of course, if you have a higher alcohol content, right, if your beer has higher alcohol content, that means it has more calories because alcohol has 7 calories a gram, which compared to carbohydrates, which are 4, and fat, which is 9, it's a lot closer to fat than it is to carbohydrates or protein.
And we're looking at a lot of craft beers now, which have that
higher alcohol content means more calories. Yep, so make sure you know that that's included. So those two, light beer and wine, are usually the lighter alternatives. Of course, you know, if you have just, let's say, vodka on the rocks, 1.5 ounces, that's pretty similar too. It's just most people mix them with some calorie-containing mixer, and then you're bumping up those numbers. But if you stick to just 1.5 ounces of hard liquor, that's a similar calorie level, around 100 calories or so.
So is it better to look for maybe something that we're not consuming all those extra things on the side, or is it okay to look for something extra on the side if we're looking for, say we have, if we're looking at keeping our blood sugar low or looking for weight management?
Yeah, in terms of blood sugar, certainly anything with added sweeteners, so anything with a soda, anything with a juice. Is going to pop our blood sugar up. So something that's non-calorie containing, or, you know, something simple like soda, you know, seltzer.
Seltzer, yeah.
Is an easy way to go, right? There's nothing added to that. It's just water with carbonation. So that will keep us more level in terms of compared to something with sugar added.
Okay, what do we need to, oh, my phone flipped sideways here. Auto rotate off. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between men and women. We talked a little bit about a healthy amount, and then you mentioned, you know, men versus women. Let's talk a little bit about that, kind of looking into why men can drink more than women.
Right. So what's interesting is the difference is actually in our stomachs. So when you look at men's stomach lining, they have more of the enzyme that breaks down alcohol. And
they're just born with it?
They're just born, they're lucky that way.
So women, don't feel insulted that, like, oh, I cannot drink you. Like, no, that's dangerous. Don't do that. You just aren't born with that in your stomach. Okay.
So what happens is when we take in alcohol, a part of it gets broken down in our stomach lining, and that part doesn't make us drunk, for instance.
Okay.
The part that's left over, that goes to our blood, and that's the part that makes us drunk. So women get about 30% more alcohol directly into their bloodstream than men for the same size person.
Oh.
So that's why it's just literally that enzyme in the stomach lining difference that men can drink a little bit more for same effect. And that's why men can have 2 drinks a day for moderate drinking. They just get less of that alcohol into their bloodstream.
It's really just how we physically metabolize?
Physically metabolize, yep. And of course, the bigger people, same concept. Bigger people can generally tolerate a little more alcohol, but still, same size women, same size men, the men will be able to metabolize a bit more compared to the woman.
Is there anything that we can do to change how we metabolize alcohol?
Yes, but I don't recommend it. So there are multiple pathways that we use to metabolize alcohol, right? The first one's the one I was talking about. They all have very long names. The ADH pathway, we'll call it for short. That's the primary one, the one we go to first. The next one we go to is something that is changeable in terms of how often it's used. So that's why people who are like, my tolerance is so high because I drink all the time. Well, yes, they're right. They've basically increased how efficient that second pathway is, and it can break down alcohol more quickly than it could before. But that's certainly not something we'd recommend because there's all the detrimental health effects. But yes, that one can go up or down depending on how much it's used.
So if you have a problem with alcohol, that's why your
tolerance gets higher. Exactly.
Okay. When you are, and is like the second way, so say you are concerned about having alcohol, so you want to eat beforehand.
Yes.
Is that kind of like
that actually works.
Sidebar?
So if you want to be less drunk on the same amount of alcohol, eating does help. The reason is just that when we have food in our system, that food and alcohol goes more slowly through our digestive system. If you have a high-fat, high-calorie meal, even more so. So eating a big, heavy meal before drinking will help you be less drunk on the same amount of booze.
So, you know, if you're going to a wedding and you're like, I want to be good at this wedding, eat something beforehand, something along those lines. Let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to have us both scoot over a little bit. Talking about, you were mentioning this before, can I say, people in college sometimes will do this, can I save up the amount I drink so I can drink more on the weekends?
Unfortunately, no.
That doesn't sound like a good idea, but you know, young people.
It's not a good idea. The logic is sound, right? Addition, right? And it doesn't work that way. You can't take your 1 drink a day, 1 drink a day, 1 drink a day, and have 3 drinks a day for the same health effects because unfortunately, your body still has to deal with that amount of alcohol at one time, and that high amount is what causes damage. And it causes damage to a lot of different body systems, from our bones, which people might not expect. But actually, heavy drinking increases your risk of osteoporosis, The liver's the one we all think about, right? But there's actually a whole host of body systems that alcohol can be damaging to. So all of those effects, and increasing your risk of cancer is certainly another one. Actually, we're talking about that pathway and how we break down alcohol. So one of the things we turn alcohol into as we process it through our body, one of those we call them intermediates, right? Because it's in between that what we start with and what we end up with, is a carcinogen, a known carcinogen. So that's one of the reasons we think we have such a higher risk of cancer if we do a lot of drinking.
Oh.
Because of that pathway.
That is fascinating. Wow. So overall, it's making me think, do I really need that glass of wine after all? Just going through here thinking, do I even need any of this? Okay, so, and binge drinking, so that can be extremely harmful for numerous reasons.
Absolutely, same thing. All of those health effects, they're multiplied when your body has this huge amount of alcohol to deal with at once. Of course, we've got short-term effects like alcohol poisoning, which is detrimental right that minute. And then we've got the long-term effects like liver damage, like increased risk of cancer and things of that line.
Okay. And we talked a little bit about eating. It can kind of somewhat help your tolerance for that day. What about eating after drinking? Does that help as well?
No, it doesn't.
Soak up the alcohol?
That one's a myth. That's just because, unfortunately, once the alcohol's already moved through your system, you can't slow it down anymore. It's too late. So the food has to be on board at the beginning to help slow that process of absorption down.
Okay, so eat before you consume your drinks. It's a good idea. And really, does anyone need to be more careful than others about drinking?
So people with a higher risk of cancer do want to be more careful. And the way you would know that is if you have a huge family history, you have lots of people in your family with cancer, or maybe you have a genetic marker that they've identified, right? BRCA1, BRCA2. We know folks that have that genetic marker are at a higher risk. So let's say you go to your oncologist, you have one of those BRCA1, BRCA2, for example. Those are some common ones. They would say, yeah, you really want to drink less. The recommendation actually for those folks is less than 2 drinks per week.
Okay.
And really, if you look at the data, and I have, any drinking increases your risk of cancer. Wow. So the 2 drinks a week, I'm guessing, is more of this is manageable for people, whereas if we say don't drink at all, that's probably not.
Wow.
But really,
so
any drinking increases, especially breast cancer, and that's what BRCA1 and 2, breast and ovarian cancer, are really specific to.
Why more so than women than men? Do you know?
That I
Did I
do
put you on the
not
spot?
know. No, it's okay. So I don't know why. I think really we have a good handle on those genetic markers. We can identify them, we can test for them, we know the risk factors. I'm sure there are other ones out there. Men actually can have those too. Yeah. It's just men have a smaller risk of breast cancer than women at baseline, right? So even if they have this genetic marker, the risk isn't as high. But I'm sure the same is going to be true for other things we haven't identified yet. Those are the ones we really know about.
Wow, that's amazing. Let's kind of keep that going. Are there any drinks that people should kind of stay away from? We kind of talked about the ones that were like, oh, maybe you want to avoid the high sugar content. Are there anything that you know that's out there that, it's just not a good idea as a nutritionist? There was all that big news, like the Four Loko. Do you remember that stuff was in the news? Or maybe like mixing energy drinks. Is there anything that you think as a nutritionist that just, flat out maybe avoid that?
That last one actually is the one I was going to say. Energy drinks should not go with alcohol. Uppers and downers in the same glass are never a good idea. Really what happens is that those energy drinks can mask the effects of the alcohol, so you might not notice the effects, and so you don't know how drunk you are, and so you can get alcohol poisoning without realizing it in the same level you normally would. So it's much more dangerous, so I really advise against those. And
do you think maybe people with heart conditions, that could be a big one as well? Just kind of continuing on that.
If you have a heart condition, you shouldn't have energy drinks ever, especially not with alcohol.
Dad? Yeah. It's always scary to think that people that have heart conditions, if they consume those kind of products, and especially consume them together, energy drinks, and not that my dad does that, but sometimes he'll have like a Red Bull if he's going to work out, and I'm like, Dad, don't drink your Red Bull. Anyway.
Caffeine's a performance enhancer, but stick with coffee.
Yeah, stick with coffee out there. And then I kind of talked to you about this. We've seen this explosion of alcohol infused with different flavors. Is there any concern, or should we be thinking about types of alcohol or drinks that have different flavors in them that maybe might not be natural, like marshmallow and banana and all this weird stuff? I mean, and we talked about this, and you're like, I'm not really sure if there's any research about it or not yet. But are maybe not so natural flavorings in alcohol something that we should be thinking about right now?
So we don't know that much about it. When I looked into it, there wasn't much I could find. I will tell you that the group that we know might be sensitive to artificial flavors and colorings are people with ADHD.
Okay.
So there's a subset, a small group of people with ADHD who seem to be triggered by artificial colors and flavors. And actually, if you look at Europe, they label those things a lot more carefully, and they are required to be in foods less than they are in the United States. And so, you know, I don't know the details of why that regulation is different, but I will tell you certainly that we have some evidence saying that, especially if we looked at children with ADHD, and hopefully children aren't drinking alcohol, but, you know, that could apply to adults as well.
Yeah.
That folks with ADHD, those might be things they want to stay away from, or certainly think about the impact of those.
Oh my gosh, that's super interesting.
A lot of that we just, you know, we don't have information on. It doesn't mean we know it's safe. You know, usually those compounds are what we call generally recognized as safe. It means they haven't caused any harm that we know of yet. So, you know, if you want to be safe, you can infuse your vodka yourself with raspberries and stick it in the fridge. There are a lot of ways to get flavored alcohol without buying the marshmallow version.
Yeah. Or you go in bars and you see them with pineapple or...
Right.
Oh, on vacation one time I saw like bacon-infused vodka, but made there.
Yep.
And that looked...
They are putting meat in booze now. Yep. And sometimes it's literally in there. Not what I recommend.
I don't want that, but if someone wants that, you'd think maybe more naturally it would be a good one. I don't know. You're the expert. That's why I'm asking you. As we kind of transition here, I want to talk to you a little bit about metabolizing. You told me something that was pretty interesting, maybe how people on average metabolize their alcohol.
Sure. So everybody has different pathways. Those, like I said, there's that one pathway that varies by people, and some folks will just be more sensitive than other people to alcohol for that reason. It's just because they metabolize it more or less slowly, so basically the alcohol moves more or less quickly to their bloodstream, and they break less of it down. And that's really where those individual differences that you find. So sometimes it's from the amount of drinking people do, but also before we even take that into account, people are just a little bit different. And certain ethnic groups actually have different metabolism of alcohol. For some groups, you know, not everybody in that group, but there's some side effects that they'll see that maybe aren't common in other ethnic groups. So there's a lot of variability, and really it's all about paying attention to how you do with alcohol and managing, you know, your individual person and not assuming everybody's the same.
Perfect. Wonderful. And you were telling me earlier, it was kind of once thought that someone on average can metabolize about a drink an hour. Is that still kind of thought to be the case?
Nope. So actually we really think it's less than that. So a lot of people go with that, right? They're like, okay, I had one drink now, that means in 1 hour I can drive. But that's really not the case. It's about a half a drink per hour. So that means you have one drink, right, which is 5 ounces of wine, which is not a big glass of wine. You wait 2 hours before you drive safely.
That's great. A great update to that, because and always stick the water in there as well, right?
Absolutely. One of the great ways to be safer is to have water in between, and healthier, right? Because we're talking about managing the amount of calories we get from alcohol, because they do tend to really add up. We're not getting any nutritional benefit, so.
Yes, no nutritional benefits at all. Well, I don't know. Are we getting? Is there any nutritional benefits?
Only with that, again, 1 to 2 drinks a day. So not with extensive drinking. No benefits. More cancer. But not other ones besides that one, like moderate drinking. Once we go beyond moderate drinking, no benefit at all.
No benefits. All right, Shira Hirshberg from All Foods Nutrition. Thank you so much for joining us, filling us in about alcohol, kind of how our body takes it in, and what we can do to drink smarter and safer. Thanks. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.